It's not controversial to say that we should give money to the poor. In fact, most people, both non-Christians and Christians, agree with that. The question is, how much should we give to the poor? Some Christians argue that we should give tithe, that is 1/10 of our income. The problem is that we still have 9/10 left, and then we are still rich and the poor are still poor. The biblical Old Testament tithe was not a maximum amount, but a minimum amount. In fact, Deuteronomy 15, verse 9, talks about how we should act when we meet the poor, even after we have given our tithes. It says, "Be careful not to show ill will toward your needy brother and give him nothing. He might then appeal to the Lord against you, and you will be found guilty of sin." So it is sinful to be able to help the poor, but not do it. The aim of giving money to the poor should be that it becomes equal for all. This is quite evident. We read that we should love our neighbors as ourselves. We read that we should do unto others as we would have them do to us. In practice, that implies that we cannot accept to have a higher standard of living than others, because then we aren't really loving them as ourselves. So just giving 1/10 and believing that's enough is false. We need to give much, much more as the world looks today. And as you've probably noticed, I have 5 spice jars in front of me, and I want to illustrate this through them. They represent the world's population, and here I have 5 cookies, and they represent the world's natural resources. Now, if you were to distribute these cookies to these spice jars, you would of course give 1 cookie per spice jar, because that's equal and fair and just. But that's not how the world looked like. The richest 20% actually got 80% of the world's resources. And then the rest of the spice jars has to share with 1 cookie. And even they aren't distributing this equally, so that the poorest 20% of the world's population only get around 2% of the world's resources, and they cannot get a good standard of living through this. These are around 1.4 billion people, and they are living in something called extreme poverty. Most of them are constantly hungry, most of them lack clean water, almost all of them lack a toilet, and they are constantly stricken by diseases. Many of the children are dying, and they don't have very long lives. So they are living in misery, and they are experiencing very much pain and sorrow. And all this is happening while the rich guys got so much more than they need, and so much more than their fair share. I think it's totally obvious that we need equality in the world. However, there are 2 ways in creating this equality. First, we have the obvious way, when the rich people distribute their wealth to the poor, and then we'll get equality for all. Of course, this means sacrifices for the rich, but at the same time, this is quite fair share. However, some rich people argue that this isn't needful, since we can, through investments and business and markets, create new cookies through economic growth. The problem with this is called environment. We cannot make everyone achieve the same standard of living as the richest 20%, because if everyone lived as average European, we would need 3 earth globes. If everyone lived as the average American, we would need 5. So even though we can create economic growth to some extent, we have of course to think about the environment, and it's not possible for everyone to get this standard of living. So the rich has to downshift and distribute their wealth. Poverty reduction needs wealth reduction. And this is what the Bible is talking about. The Bible isn't talking about that everyone should get the same standard of living as the rich, but that the rich also should sacrifice. John the Baptist talked a lot about repentance. And in Luke chapter 3, read about how the people asked him how one would act after one had repented. They asked, "What should we do?" And John answered, "The man with 2 tunics should share with him who has none, and the one who has food should do the same." Economic equality, when the rich get poorer and the poor get richer. 2 Corinthians is talking about exactly the same thing. Paul is saying there in the 8th chapter, verse 13 and onwards, "Our desire is not that others might be relieved while you are hard pressed, but that there might be equality. At the present time your plenty will supply what they need, so that in turn their plenty will supply what you need. Then there will be equality. As it is written, he that gathered much did not have too much, and he that gathered little did not have too little." This latter quote is from Exodus 16, when it says about the Israelites that went through the desert and God gave them manna from heaven. And in order to prevent the greedy to take all the bread for themselves so that others were hungry, this manna got bad the next day, and then you had to gather new bread every day, and thus equality was created. Acts is talking about the same thing. Acts chapter 4 is talking about the first church in Jerusalem and their economic system that created total equality. It says, "All the believers were one in heart and mind," in Acts chapter 4, verse 32 and onwards. "No one claimed that any of his possession was his own, but they share everything they had." And then in verse 34, "There were no needy persons among them." So the church achieved what so many aid organizations are aiming for today. They eliminated poverty. And how did they do that? Well, they eliminated personal wealth. There was total economic equality, and you cannot have equality and personal wealth at the same time. This is the biblical version. Now, and there are many misconceptions concerning this first church models. Many arguing that this actually was abnormal and not a norm for the rest of the church, which is false. And I will talk more about that in my next video, so please check that out. God bless you.